The Eternal Empire had lasted so long that its citizens believed it to be as permanent as gravity. 1,000 worlds bent beneath its banners, each compelled to speak the Emperor's tongue, march to the Empire's drum, and pay tribute in the form of minerals, food, or culture. In fact, entire planets had been forced to abandon their native music when Emperor Xylox decided that offbeat drumming offended his sensibilities. He sat on his throne surrounded by courtiers who agreed with every word he spoke, each too terrified to disagree. For centuries, fleets of black warships had patrolled the galaxy, an iron wall against rebellion. That wall was about to crumble, though no one knew it yet, when a ship that didn't belong to any registry in the known universe drifted into the heart of Imperial space. It was not elegant. It was not sleek. If Imperial warships were daggers forged from polished obsidian, the strange vessel was more like a battered kitchen spoon that had survived a garbage disposal. Its hull bore mismatched plating, some clearly salvaged from scrapyards, others smeared with something suspiciously like hand-applied sealant. There were scorch marks along its flanks, dents that looked as if entire moons had taken swings at it, and faint graffiti scrawl near the port side hatched that read, "Property of Murphy, hands off." No lights pulsed along its surface. No shields shimmered around its body. The Imperial commander who first saw it squinted at his tactical display and muttered to his crew, "Tell me why a space food truck is parked in the Emperor's front yard." Within hours, 10 Imperial dreadnoughts surrounded the newcomer, their engines glowing like furious suns. Admiral Creel, who prided himself on a voice that could silence an arena, prepared a formal broadcast. He adjusted his ornate hat, cleared his throat, and announced, "Unidentified vessel, you have trespassed into Imperial space. By decree of His Eternal Majesty, you will identify yourself immediately or face annihilation." His voice echoed across the comms with dramatic weight. He expected fear, please, perhaps even surrender. What he did not expect was static followed by the tinny beat of drums and a voice shrieking, "Stop! Hammer time!" The dreadnought's bridge went quiet as Admiral Creel stiffened. "What in the black suns is that?" he demanded. His communications officer replayed the signal, frowning. "Sir, it appears to be ancient Terran audio. Late 20th century, if I'm not mistaken. Some form of rhythmic boast." The Admiral's face purpled. "They mock us. Prepare weapons." But as targeting systems locked on, every screen on the bridge went dark, then lit again to display a pixelated yellow figure devouring dots. A sound like cheerful chomping filled the air. The fleet's flagship had been hijacked by something that looked suspiciously like Pac-Man. The crew of the mysterious ship remained blissfully unaware of the chaos they caused. In the cramped control room, Captain Jack Murphy lounged in a worn pilot's chair, boots propped on the console. He was broad-shouldered, unshaven, and carried himself with the casual swagger of a man who had survived too many bar fights to count. He tapped the side of a cracked coffee mug and sighed. "Another day, another stretch of nothing. Vega, you ever figure out what's squealing under the engine deck?" "Yeah," Lena Vega replied without looking up from a tangle of wires. She was in her early 30s, grease-streaked, sharp-eyed, and possessed of that rare patience required to keep a vessel like this from falling apart mid-flight. "Turns out if you jam duct tape between the plasma intake and the coffee machine, the wine goes away. Also, the coffee tastes like ozone now. You're welcome." She shoved her curly hair out of her eyes and smirked. The third presence on board was less helpful. Infomax 2000, the ship's artificially intelligent assistant, existed inside every console speaker. Its voice was eternally cheerful, eternally obnoxious, and eternally trapped in the style of late 1990s infomercials. "Congratulations," it chirped. "By choosing the Yard Sales Navigation Package, you've unlocked 3 free light years of travel. But hurry, offer ends soon." Murphy groaned and muttered, "Why did we ever install that thing?" Lena shot back, "Because it was free with a box of cereal, that's why. And because you thought an AI would sound cool." The crew of the USS Yard Sale had no grand mission. The ship itself was a relic, half cargo hauler, half experimental shuttle, patched together from scrapyards across half a dozen human colonies. Its engines ran on a jury-rigged fusion core linked to a cluster of antique game consoles because, according to Vega, Nintendo built things to last forever. Its shields were non-existent, its weapons offline, and its navigation system one spilled soda away from total collapse. Jack Murphy didn't care. He had spent his career in the Terra Navy, seen combat, buried friends, and decided one day that a life of small jobs, long jumps, and second-hand adventures was preferable to watching more wars unfold. Yet despite their lack of ambition, fate had dragged them into the dead center of the most militarized zone in the galaxy. Vega peered at the console and frowned. "Jack, why are there like 50 ships around us? Either they're here for a parade or we just crashed the wrong neighborhood barbecue." Murphy tilted his head, squinting at the view beyond the canopy. Towering black warships encircled them, bristling with cannons. Their presence was impossible to misinterpret. Still, he shrugged and reached for his mug. "Relax. Maybe they just want to borrow sugar. Or duct tape. Everybody wants duct tape." As if on cue, Infomax piped up, "Warning. Multiple external signals detected." Translation suggests phrases such as surrender or perish. "Congratulations. You are this week's lucky contestant." Murphy snorted into his coffee. "Figures. First real contact in months, and it's with intergalactic debt collectors." On the dreadnoughts, panic spread as systems continued to collapse. Weapons wouldn't fire, navigation froze, and life support alarms blared false warnings. Admiral Creel slammed his fist on the console. "Why aren't we blasting them out of existence?" His tactical officer stammered, "Sir, the instant we target them, our own systems glitch. It's as if reality itself refuses to let us harm that ship." Creel swore under his breath, staring at the battered vessel, the ridiculous patchwork plating, the smug graffiti. A ship held together with duct tape had just paralyzed the most powerful fleet in the Empire. Back aboard the yard sail, Murphy leaned closer to the viewport, utterly unimpressed. "They sure look mad. Lena, should we—" "I dunno, Wave." Lena shrugged, pulling another strip of duct tape from her belt. "Wave, flip a coin, play them some Bon Jovi, it won't matter. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be scrap." Murphy considered this, then raised his mug toward the encircling warships like a man making a toast. The gesture was small, almost lazy. Yet to the terrified Imperials watching from 1,000 screens, it looked like the calm salute of a predator too powerful to care. Creel whispered, "By the Emperor's bones, what have we awakened?" The first cracks in the Empire had begun to spread, and neither Murphy nor his ragtag crew had the faintest clue. They were too busy arguing about whether the engine whine was better drowned out by duct tape or by blasting living on a prayer at full volume. Admiral Creel was no stranger to fear, but watching his entire fleet lock up like malfunctioning toys, while a single derelict freighter drifted unconcerned in their midst made his stomach knot in ways no battle ever had. His officers scrambled across the bridge, shouting over one another, yanking at controls that refused to obey. Screens flashed pixelated ghosts and chomping yellow mouths, entire dreadnoughts paralyzed by what appeared to be a crude human game from some forgotten century. Creel tried to imagine reporting this to Emperor Xylox. "We were bested by a ship held together with tape and a children's puzzle." His career, and perhaps his head, would not survive the retelling. He barked orders for a boarding party, anything to regain control of the narrative. Perhaps if they captured the vessel's crew, they could study whatever strange technology crippled Imperial systems. A shuttle launched, carrying the Empire's ambassador and a handful of guards. The moment their vessel detached, their controls returned, proving again that proximity to the rust bucket ship was what triggered the malfunctions. Creel muttered a silent prayer that whatever strange curse lingered around the freighter did not devour his last chance at redemption. Inside the yard sail, Jack Murphy reclined in the pilot's chair, legs crossed, tapping his mug against the armrest. Lena Vega hunched over a console, muttering at tangled wires. She glanced at the radar, frowned, and said, "Hey Cap, one of those shiny guys is peeling off. Think we're about to get visitors." Murphy grunted without looking up. "Figures. Can't just leave a man to his coffee. Probably coming over to sell us extended warranties." Infomax 2000 chose that moment to blare through the speakers. "Congratulations. You may already be a winner of a galactic intrusion. Please prepare your vessel for complimentary inspection." Lena rolled her eyes so hard it hurt. "I swear one day I'm going to reprogram that AI to only scream curse words." Moments later, the Imperial ambassador stepped onto their docking ramp, posture stiff, eyes darting like a man trying to mask terror with dignity. He was flanked by guards whose armor gleamed, but whose hands trembled just enough to betray unease. Murphy met them at the hatch, leaning casually against the frame, looking more like a man greeting neighbors than facing the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful empire. "Howdy," he said, voice lazy, almost mocking. "Coffee's hot, engines are barely working, and the stereo's stuck on shuffle. Welcome to the yard sale." The ambassador blinked, his rehearsed speech scattering like birds in a storm. He had expected gods of destruction or architects of ancient war. Instead, he found a man with stubble, a woman smeared with grease, and an AI humming the theme from Seinfeld. Still, he pushed on, bowing stiffly. "On behalf of Eternal Empire, I extend greetings. You have demonstrated powers beyond comprehension. The Emperor wishes to know your terms." Murphy exchanged a glance with Lena, who raised an eyebrow. "Terms," she mouthed. Murphy smirked, then turned back. "Sure. Terms are simple. You folks stop pointing guns at us, we stop spilling coffee on your fancy consoles." The ambassador's face paled. He scribbled frantically on his datapad, whispering to his guards. To him, the phrase was a threat of unimaginable subtlety. These beings controlled machines with a mere accident of spilled liquid. They wielded humor as a weapon, indifference as dominance. Murphy, oblivious to the fear he sowed, leaned closer. "Look, friend, I don't know what you've got rattling around in your head, but we're just passing through. Got lost on the way to, well, honestly, I forget where we were headed." "Vega, where were we headed?" "Back to the scrapyards," Lena said, not looking up. "Wanted to find a part for the cooling system. Ship's hotter than a cheap microwave." The ambassador scribbled again. Scrapyards, surely a metaphor for galactic graveyards. Cooling system, perhaps a reference to weapons that extinguish stars. His guards began to sweat inside their helmets. Infomax, never missing a chance to ruin moment, chimed in brightly. "Warning, you have only 3 minutes left in your free trial of diplomatic patience." Murphy smacked the console. "Shut up before I toss you out the airlock." The ambassador startled, taking the words literally. He bowed so fast his helmet clanged against his breastplate. "Forgive us, O ancients. We shall not overstay." He turned on his heel, dragging his guards back toward the shuttle. Lena blinked. "Well, that was quick. What did you say to him?" Murphy shrugged. "Dunno. Guess I've still got it." He sipped his coffee, completely unaware that an empire-shaking misunderstanding had just taken root. Back on the dreadnought, the ambassador collapsed before Admiral Creel, breathless. They toy with us. They speak in riddles. Their demands are unknowable. They drink scalding liquid without fear. They summon storms of glitches at will. Admiral, they are the destroyers of civilizations." Creel felt sweat bead on his forehead. Destroyers of civilizations. That phrase would spread like fire through Imperial ranks, whether he wanted it to or not. Already, the bridge crew leaned closer, whispering to each other. Some crossed themselves in ancient gestures meant to ward off spirits. Creel slammed his fist down, silencing them. "Superstitions will not save us. We will return to the Emperor and report. He alone will decide our fate." But even Creel knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that the decision had already been made, not by the Emperor, but by the strange, duct-tape vessel drifting at the center of his fleet like an uninvited guest at the galaxy's grandest banquet. Inside the yard sale, Lena kicked back in her chair, legs stretched across the console. "So," she said, smirking at Murphy, "think we just made friends?" Murphy leaned back, mug in hand, staring at the thousands of warships keeping their distance. He chuckled, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "If that's their idea of friendship, I'd hate to see their enemies." And though neither of them knew it, the first tremors of rebellion were already racing across the galaxy, fueled by the terrified whispers of Imperial soldiers who now believed that humanity, long thought extinct, or at least irrelevant, had returned with a vengeance. All because one ragged ship with a sarcastic AI and a captain who lived on coffee had wandered into the wrong star system. Emperor Xylox's palace was carved into the surface of the capital's black moon, a fortress built to intimidate anyone who dared to look upon it. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with embedded crystals designed to hum imperial hymns at all hours of the day, a constant reminder of his supposed divinity. Yet on that morning, the hymns sounded hollow, drowned beneath whispers spreading through the chamber. The word had reached every corridor, every bureaucrat's trembling lips: humans. For centuries, they had been little more than rumor, half-dismissed tales about a species that had once risen, fought, and then vanished. The Emperor had always scoffed at such legends. Now, after Admiral Creel's account, even he felt a rare twinge of unease. If fear was contagious, then humanity's name was the spark lighting the powder trail. The Emperor dismissed the council with a flick of his jeweled hand. Alone, he walked to the balcony that overlooked the fleet yards. Hundreds of starships floated in neat rows, more than enough to reduce entire worlds to dust. He had ruled too long to yield to ghosts. If the ancients had returned, then he would remind them why the galaxy bowed to him. "Prepare everything," he hissed to the silent halls. "We will strike, and the galaxy will remember who commands fear." Far from the capital, on the yard sail, Jack Murphy stretched in his chair and stared at the void. The view was calm, but he could sense the storm building. The Empire was not a beast to forgive insults. "They're planning something," he muttered. Lena Vega, crouched under a console again, didn't look up. "They've been planning something since the moment we stumbled into their backyard. I'd be more surprised if they weren't trying to kill us." Sparks popped, and she swore under her breath. Murphy rubbed the bridge of his nose, staring at his reflection in the viewport glass. He wasn't a stranger to war. He'd seen fleets clash and cities burn, and the memory of screams still haunted his sleep. But this absurdity was different. Here he was, a man who barely managed to keep his coffee warm in the morning, staring down an empire that believed him to be some resurrected conqueror. He wondered if fate had chosen the wrong human for the job. Infomax blared from the ceiling, chipper as ever. "Good news. Galactic opinion polls rate you as the #1 threat to civilization this quarter. Bad news, your coffee machine is still leaking." Murphy kicked the console. "Shut it before I rip out your speakers." Vega smirked from beneath the panel. "He's not wrong. That leak's going to fry the circuits." The ship shuddered then, a low tremor that ran through every bolt. Lights dimmed. Vega jerked upright, eyes wide. "Jack, that wasn't the coffee machine." Infomax chirped, "Congratulations. You have unlocked subsystem Omega. Warning, user manual not included." Both humans froze, staring at each other, silent recognition sparking between them. Something about this ship was not what it seemed. Before they could speak, the storm arrived. The void outside filled with warships, 1,000 strong, their combined mass blotting out stars. The Emperor's armada had come, a wall of steel and firepower unlike anything Vega had ever seen. She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the console. That's not intimidation, Jack. That's extermination." Murphy took a long sip from his mug, masking his unease with practiced nonchalance. Well, at least they didn't send just one ship. That would have been insulting. His joke fell flat against the magnitude of the threat. Vega turned to him, eyes sharp. "We need to understand this ship. Now, whatever that Omega thing is, it's the reason they're terrified of us. And it's the only reason we're not space dust already." The first volley erupted. Beams brighter than suns tore across the void, converging on the yard sail. Vega braced for impact, but every shot fizzled harmlessly, dissolving into sparks. A second volley followed, and then a third, each failure more humiliating than the last. Imperial gunners cursed, officers screamed, but the ship remained untouched, a stubborn relic immune to annihilation. Murphy raised an eyebrow at the harmless flashes outside. "You see that? Either their weapons are broken, or we're the luckiest fools in the galaxy." Vega shook her head, voice tight. "Not luck. Something's interfering with their systems, twisting their tech the same way it did when Creel's fleet surrounded us. And whatever it is, it's coming from this ship." On the flagship, Admiral Creel watched in mounting despair. Thousands of ships firing, and not a single scratch inflicted. Already, whispers spread across the bridge. The ancients cannot be harmed. The ancients are eternal. Creel slammed his fist against the railing. He had served too long to believe in fairy tales, yet even he felt the chill of inevitability creeping into his bones. Back on the yard sail, Murphy finally lowered his mug and leaned forward, his usual smirk gone. "If this ship has some secret weapon, Vega, we need to know how to control it. Otherwise, we're just passengers, and this thing is driving itself." Vega nodded, determination hardening her features. "Then we take control. No more stumbling. No more accidents. If this ship is our burden, we learn to carry it." The battle outside dissolved into chaos. Imperial ships collided as their guidance systems failed. Cannons backfired. Engines died mid-burn, sending cruisers spiraling into one another. The most disciplined armada in the galaxy tore itself apart in less than an hour, undone by the invisible influence of a single battered freighter. Vega watched, horror and fascination mingling in her eyes. "Jack, do you realize what this means? To them, we're not just humans. We're myths. Legends they feared for millennia. Murphy exhaled slowly, gaze fixed on the collapsing fleet. Then the joke's on them. Because we don't even know what we are. The last of the armada scattered, survivors limping back toward the capital. Across the galaxy, rumors would spread like wildfire. Tales of humans who commanded impossible power, who drank steaming poisons and mocked empires with careless toasts. On oppressed worlds, hope would rise. In palaces, terror would grow. And on the yard sail, two humans sat in the silence after chaos, realizing for the first time that they could not simply drift away from what they had stumbled into. Vega broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. We can't keep pretending this is just bad luck and duct tape, Jack. This ship is changing everything. And if we don't figure out how, the galaxy is going to decide for us. Murphy looked at her, then at the stars beyond, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke, voice low, almost resigned. Guess it's time we stop running. Somewhere deep within the yard sail, unseen and ancient, subsystem Omega pulsed again, like the heartbeat of something long asleep, but beginning to stir. Murphy had never liked silence, not the suffocating kind that followed a battlefield after the shooting stopped. The wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted around them, like broken teeth scattered across the void, and still he couldn't shake the weight of what they had just done. The yard sail hummed, its systems alive with some inscrutable intelligence, and though the war was over in a sense, Murphy knew it had only just begun. Lena Vega stood near the console, shoulders tense, her eyes locked on the dying glow of Omega's glyphs fading into the dark. She had always carried herself with the hardened poise of a soldier, but now there was something brittle beneath it, a thread pulled too tight. She hadn't flinched when the fleet imploded, when the Emperor's flagship went dark, when millions of soldiers suddenly found themselves defenseless, but the choice Murphy had made still hung heavy between them. You could have ended it, she said finally, her voice sharper than the silence. You had the command right there. One touch, and the Empire would be gone. Instead, you left him alive. Murphy leaned back in the pilot's chair, exhaustion etched into his face, but his tone carried its usual rough-edged humor. And what? Push the magic red button that says genocide? I'm not here to play exterminator. Last I checked, we're supposed to be the good guys. Her jaw clenched. The good guys don't let tyrants regroup. And the monsters don't hesitate to burn 1 billion lives to make a point, he countered, meeting her gaze. I'm not going to cross that line, Vega. Not today. For a moment, she looked as if she might strike him, her fury barely contained. But then her expression shifted, a storm breaking behind her eyes. She turned away, shoulders stiff. You think you've saved lives. Maybe you've only delayed their suffering. Murphy opened his mouth, but before he could reply, the ship jolted, as though something vast had stirred in the dark. The console flared, symbols cascading across the screens. Omega was not dormant, it was watching, adapting. And then, with eerie precision, the systems translated its alien script into a single sentence. One choice does not end the cycle. Another will come. Vega read it aloud, her voice low. Murphy gave a humorless laugh. Great. Our ship's a philosopher now. But the words sat heavy in the cabin. Omega was no mere machine. It was a relic with its own will, its own plan, and the humans were no longer certain whether they commanded it, or it commanded them. The uneasy truce between them and their ship didn't last long. Alarms flared, not from the Empire, but from the scattered transmissions bleeding across comms. Systems across the galaxy were erupting into chaos. Colonies rebelled, trade collapsed, warlords rose where imperial rule had fractured. Hope had ignited rebellions, but with the Emperor crippled rather than dead, the galaxy teetered on a knife's edge between liberation and anarchy. Murphy rubbed his temples, muttering, We didn't kill the monster, we just knocked it off its throne. Now every wannabe despot's going to crawl out of the shadows. Vega faced him, her expression unreadable. Then maybe that's the war we're meant to fight. Not exterminating empires. Not pressing Omega's buttons. Something else. Something human. Her words lingered, cutting through the haze of defeat and doubt. She had always been the soldier, the strategist, the one who saw the cleanest line to victory, no matter how bloody. Yet now she spoke of restraint, of something larger than vengeance. It surprised him, and perhaps it surprised her too. Before Murphy could answer, the comms lit up with a priority transmission. Against the backdrop of static, the voice of the Emperor thundered through, cracked and desperate. Humans, you believe you've humbled me. You believe mercy makes you strong. But know this, I will rise again. I will not fall to relics or ghosts. When I return, it will not be war you face, but extinction. The transmission cut out, leaving only silence. Murphy leaned back and blew out a slow breath. Cheerful guy. He'd do well on late-night radio. Vega didn't smile. He's not bluffing. That voice wasn't defeat, it was obsession. He'll tear the galaxy apart just to prove us wrong. Murphy drummed his fingers on the armrest, staring out at the void littered with debris. Then we don't wait for him to come to us. We find him. We end this our way. The declaration surprised even him, but Vega nodded slowly, approval flickering in her eyes. It wasn't vengeance she saw in him, but conviction, the line he wouldn't cross, and the one he would defend. The yard sail's engines roared to life as Omega pulsed again, its strange consciousness aligning with their intent. The ship wasn't guiding them this time. It was waiting, ready to follow. For the first time, Murphy felt they weren't passengers on a relic. They were partners with it. As the stars stretched into streaks of light, Vega moved to stand beside him, her voice quiet. You know this won't end clean. Whatever's coming, it's going to demand more than either of us is ready to give. Murphy smirked, though his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. Story of my life. But hey, if the galaxy wants a reminder of what humans are, I say we give them the unfiltered version. Messy, stubborn, loud. And maybe, just maybe, civilized enough not to burn the whole house down. The jump carried them into darkness, where the Emperor plotted his return and rebellions clawed for power. The galaxy waited, trembling between collapse and rebirth, and two humans in a battered freighter now carried the burden of deciding which way it would fall. For the first time, Murphy didn't dread the silence of the void. It wasn't the silence after battle. It was the silence before the next storm. And this time, he intended to meet it head-on.